If you thought today was hot, then imagine what it was like in the middle of the day playing baseball. Well, that's exactly what they were doing in the high school's inter-regional championships final. It was no surprise for fans of high school baseball that the Metropolitan West team in the blue and yellow outfits were in today's final. They're the reigning champions and were undefeated thus far in the three-day championships. North Coast, on the other hand, caused a surprise when they made the finals and were very much the underdogs. They scraped into the semis on percentages, and in the first round of the competition they were beaten by today's opponents 2-1. Both teams boast a number of junior state players, but it was North Coast who made the best start, racing away to a 5-0 lead in the third innings. Met West came back on their next bat and cut the gap back to 5-4 down. Now the match was really on, and it was an exciting showdown. North Coast hung on to their slender lead until the 1 3/4 hour time limit was up to score an upset win. For the Hunter, our side finished 5th overall with a very young side. Afterwards, Morisset High School student David Campbell was selected in the state high school team for the Australian Championships in 6 weeks.
In 10 days' time, East West Airlines will cease to operate out of the Williamtown Air Terminal. Newcastle will no longer be included in its Sydney to Brisbane route. How this will affect local air travellers and particularly the service offered by Air New South Wales was the main point of discussion at a special board meeting of Air New South Wales directors today.
Join Ray Deneen and Anna Manzoni for all the news tonight at 6.
A good crowd was on hand today at the Lambton Bowling Club for the quarterfinals of the Hunter Challenge Bowls Tournament. 4 local Hunter pairs took on teams from the rest of Australia, and there was plenty of bowls action.
Join Ray Deneen and Anna Manzoni for all the news tonight at 6.
The message on that bookmark refers to the closing of the Redhead Library, and we'd appreciate if you agree that libraries shouldn't be closed, and write to the town clerk, his address is on the bookmark, and let him know that you agree that libraries should be open and not closed. Thank you.
6 fire units from Swansea and Newcastle and the Catherine Hill Bay Bushfire Brigade were called to the fire near the Wallarah Colliery in the early hours of this morning. It seemed like a routine call with a small area of bush on the side of the road alight. But as the men fought the blaze, several were overcome by fumes from drums in the centre of the fire. 2 firemen were taken immediately to Belmont Hospital, suffering toxic inhalation. The other 14 were taken later for a precautionary check. It was first believed the drums contained oil, but by morning the firemen were uncertain what was inside them. The captain of the Catherine Hill Bay Bushfire Brigade, Dennis Boyd, was one of the men worst hit. He was released from hospital late this morning and was back out at the scene by midday.
Next time we come across these drums, and when we accidentally hit it with water, and that's when it reacted. Took off and just sent off a pretty good sort of a gas, you know, like a real sweet smell, and that was it. So we just got the boys in, and they went down to breathing gear. We didn't know what it was.
So what happened to you guys? What happened to the guys who got caught with the fumes?
Well, to the 2, they sent us to hospital, took us over, we were a bit crook with it, and they finished up keeping me there overnight, but the other bloke, he was all right.
By this afternoon, all the men were released from hospital and firemen set about the task of removing the drums. The State Pollution Control Board was taking samples to determine what they contained and investigating the incident.
Dribble. That's a... Ooh, Jesus.
What a foil, it come to me that easy. I forgot about the foil on it.
I think it's beyond the berry. You've got one in Joe Wayne. Bob there. And Bob's diving rocket.
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
He wasn't there.
It was very nearly a serious accident when 17 firemen were affected by toxic inhalation at a fire in bush near Catherine Hill Bay late on Friday night. The problem was a pile of drums dumped in the bush on the side of the road near the Wallarah Colliery. The combination of the fire and the water that firemen played on the drums caused fumes that left many of the men very sick. Luckily, no one suffered serious injuries, but Jeff Pasterfield says it was cause for concern.
Well, I think last Friday shows quite clearly that we need to be able to try to at least understand some of the potential hazards of people doing this particular kind of thing that can certainly produce a very serious situation for us.
Last September, the Mayor instigated a report on the development of a counter-disaster plan for the city. He's hurrying that up now following the weekend incident. He says the councils have an important role in averting and handling disasters, and says that any plan would cover more than just the issue of toxic dumping.
There are scattered disasters, but it's been shown quite clearly that there's always the potential for disaster generally. And in this particular district, we of course belong to one of the most serious fire areas of the whole of the world.
The accident happened at about 10 to 8 on the Merrywall Road, 4 kilometres from Denman. The 43 children, aged from 5 to 18, were travelling to school in Muswellbrook when their bus was hit at the level crossing. The initial impact was in the front of the bus, where the younger children were sitting. The bus was then spun around and collided with the side of the train. The front windscreen frame of the bus, which was wrapped around the train's car catcher, was a green indication of the force with which the bus was hit. One of the first on the scene was nearby resident Laurie Ayres.
Well, when I arrived here, there was a few of the locals around already had separated the two casualties, the bad ones, and the rest were being comforted by the other children on the bus mainly.
About 10 children were taken home from the scene suffering from shock, and 32 more were first taken to Denman Hospital. 6 are still being treated there for fractures and lacerations. There was suspended confusion at the hospitals, and parents unsure how seriously their children have been injured. 3 were transferred to Muswellbrook Hospital, and 3 more were flown to Royal Newcastle Hospital suffering from head and spinal injuries. One of those, a 16-year-old girl, was transferred to the Royal North Shore Hospital spinal unit this afternoon.
The level crossing accident between the wheat train and the school bus has officials baffled because the bus must have run parallel with the train for at least half a kilometre before it turned into the level crossing.
The crossing is one of the clearest of the 13 in the Muswellbrook Shire. Investigations are being carried out by both the police and the State Rail Authority. One of the factors being investigated is the bus's brakes, which were repaired yesterday.
In the appropriate setting of the Café Mozart in the Picardy Centre, the Hunter Ensemble made its public debut. The ensemble will become the permanent nucleus of the Hunter Orchestra, comprising 8 of Australia's most gifted young musicians, who each lead a section of the orchestra. The aim is to keep these professional musicians employed by hiring them out to play public concerts, schools, and music for social occasions. Add or subtract a few musicians and the ensemble will perform as a quintet or an octet. The enterprise is being backed with $17,000 from the Australia Council and the Office of the Minister for the Arts. But even with those grants, the ensemble, and by association the orchestra, must prove popular to remain financially viable.
Well, we've had great support from both the government, New South Wales, and also the Australia Council. The essence of support is whether the public backs us. If we get public support, then the funding bodies will back us too. But of course they're not going to throw money away if people are not interested. And we're doing our best to make sure they are interested.
The ensemble plays its first concert at the Michelangelo Centre in Hamilton on the 9th of next month, while the orchestra begins its first season of the year at the City Hall on the 22nd, when it will play the music of Mozart from the movie Amadeus.
As is the case at all major events on the racing calendar, the opening of the NJC's new prize attraction was accompanied by no shortage of pomp and ceremony. The new centre was started in January last year with a loan from the Racecourse Development Commission. Up until now, the newest stand at Broadmeadow was the members' stand, which was built between the World Wars in 1921. Today, the complex was declared open with a swarm of balloons and the accompaniment of the Broadmeadow High School's band. Then it was up into the new facility, where the Minister for Sport, Recreation and Tourism, Michael Cleary, unveiled the commemorative plaque. The new centre provides modern and comfortable facilities for the punter. The NJC is hopeful that the new centre will help draw large crowds back to the course.
Well, I think basically it means Broadmeadow is competitive, not only with other race clubs throughout Australia, but also in competing for the public's leisure time. I think the new facilities with their ultra-modern comforts are A1 and really should bring people to the races.
The other attraction today was the first feature on the card, the richest maiden event in Australia, the $15,000 Crossroads Motors Maiden Handicap over 1,300 metres. Whether you were watching in the newsstand on the closed-circuit televisions or at the fence, it was an exciting finish with number 1 High Hill Fury first past the post.
Organised by the Newcastle Jaycees, former Deputy Mayor and Chairman of the citizens group Don Geddes and member for the ALP John McNaughton were invited to address the club's dinner meeting. With such a controversial topic, both speakers were adamant about their views. John McNaughton stressed the need for unity under one leader.
It's something that we lack totally at the present time, and it's been a great opportunity for this city to see that what happens when you don't have that leadership, and the fact that it's gone on so long has brought it home to, I would suggest, every thinking citizen in this place. We're about leadership, and the team that I will put together to lead this city will be such that we will have the leadership that's necessary, we'll have the example of what needs to be done, and we'll carry this city on to greater and greater heights.
Don Geddes believes that the past history of the Newcastle City Council is an example for future bodies to establish political security.
If elected as a Lord Mayor or as an Alderman, I will strongly support the Local Government Association in having safeguards against the unjustified dismissal of a council and the failure to have early elections following such a dismissal. As a policy of mine and as a Lord Mayor of Newcastle, I would create a foundation known as the 21st Century Foundation, whose principal objects would be to take Newcastle into the 21st century as a well-planned, commercially and industrially viable proposition. I want to make Newcastle the most important city in Australia, and if I have my way, with your support, I will in fact be able to do it.
Federal and state politicians, including the Minister for Transport, Ron Newlock, were at Carrington Slipways for the launching of the twin-hulled ferry. Mrs Heather Wade, wife of the member for Newcastle Arthur Wade, named the ferry the Shortland and smashed the traditional bottle of champagne to wish the vessel well. Mr Wade fought hard to retain the service after a private operator withdrew in 1982. The state government decided to take over the service under the control of the Urban Transit Authority. The Shortland's sister vessel, the Hunter, will be launched in May. Both ferries, which are 18 metres long and can carry 200 passengers, represent a $1.8 million contract for Carrington Slipways and are part of the federal government's bicentennial project.
Barrington Tops was originally declared a national park with the intention of preserving forever its majestic alpine scenery, its snowgrass plains, its woodlands and its rainforest areas. Now, only 30 years down the track, the national park is under threat. According to the National Parks and Wildlife Service, it's the worst problem the region has had to face.
The threat is an insidious one, a weed known as Scotch Broom. This vigorous shrub was introduced from Europe in the 1840s as a garden plant. It spread rapidly and now covers more than 10,000 hectares of freehold land, state forest and national park across the Barrington Plateau. In spring, the weed produces a profusion of yellow flowers. In summer, thousands of seeds explode from these pods. They are easily spread by animals, especially feral pigs, by bushwalkers carrying seeds unknowingly on their boots, by four-wheel drives and through streams and rivers. Left unchecked, Scotch weed eliminates native shrubs and grasses, leaving only eucalypts.
It was thought Scotch Broom was only viable above an altitude of 1,000 metres, that the weeds growing below this level would only bear infertile seeds. But recent tests have cast doubts on the theory, and this is of great concern to the National Parks and Wildlife Service.
Well, obviously it can then invade agricultural land, and there's plenty of good agricultural land to the east of the plateau. And if it gets a hold there, then it's a whole different ballgame. Here we're talking about conservation values. There we're talking about agricultural values.
A program to eradicate the weed was launched 10 years ago, spraying first with 2,4,5-T and later with the herbicide Garland. However, the plant's hardiness and the rugged nature of the terrain have meant its spread has far outpaced these efforts.
In the last 10 years we've spent about $400,000 controlling Scotch Broom. That's just on Barrington Tops. And on top of that, the Forestry Commission and private property owners have probably spent at least as much again.
Big eggs, little eggs, and just about every other type of egg you could imagine. The final rush for this year's selection is now on in all specialty shops. Easter trading has once again been extended. Most retailers will open their doors for business on Easter Saturday between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m, with most trading between the hours of 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. High sales on the chocolate delights have already been recorded, and just to make sure that no one misses out, shop owners are advising Easter egg searchers to find them early.
It may be officially alive until Sunday, but just to make sure that this year's batch is as good as last year's, it's always wise to take a pre-sample.
gathered at the Western Suburbs Leagues Club last night to honour the man who has become a distinguished and recognised figure in Newcastle. John Risby will officially retire from his position as General Manager of the Rod and Bar Products Division of BHP in May. His farewell dinner allowed friends and colleagues of Jack's 44.5 years of service to say their goodbyes before a well-deserved trip overseas.
I represent people who I've known since 1940 perhaps, people that I've played cricket with, people that I've played football with, worked with, representative of firms that we've dealt with, and I'm going to have a busy night.
What have you planned for your retirement? Are you cutting all your strings with BHP?
Oh no, I'll be involved with Kooragang Coal Loader as a director, and I'll have some work to do in the city. I'm chairman of the Port Advisory Board, and I'm interested in the Newcastle Club, and no doubt there'll be other opportunities come along. So,
are you sad to leave the company?
Oh, naturally, but you know, when it comes to retirement, you have to prepare for the next part of your life. So, I'll be unhappy, but I'll be still pretty close to them and watching what goes on with interest.
Specially designed graduate diploma in applied science nursing course is a 2-year course designed for
possible strike is a reality.
diploma. At the conclusion of the training, the students will attain the same competency as those undertaking the diploma nursing course at the undergraduate level. Mr. Arnsworth says, though, it has to be understood that this course is a temporary measure designed to offset existing shortages. The state government has allocated $9.5 million to ease the shortage of nurses, and the course is one of the strategies that will be employed. But in Newcastle, where the nursing shortage is also a problem, there will be no extra course until at least next year.
I think the immediate response has been that the greatest shortages have obviously been in the larger region of Sydney, and it's gone to Sydney. But in the long term, it concerns me that a region of 500,000 people, the size of Newcastle, who are obviously interested in their own health, if you look at the developments in oncology and so on, has tended to be seen as being an adjunct to Sydney, where in an area of high unemployment, it's obviously very difficult, and particularly for women, to just up and go to Sydney for training. It's too far, and there are family considerations, and it's too costly. We have not only the means, but we also have the expertise at Newcastle College of Advanced Education to offer this kind of training program.